Good morning, Morai, Rabotai, Bruchim Abayim. We are continuing on Masechet Rosh Hashanah, and we are on Daf Yud Dalet, Amud Bet, some 10 lines up from the bottom of the Amud. Amar Rabba Bar Rav Huna. Today's Amud is being learned as a Zchut Refuah Shelema for Daniel, Moshe ben Farangis Abraham, Rachel, Simcha, Bat Nahid, Miriam, Bat Nosrat, Toch Shar Kol Cholei Yisrael. They should have Refuah Shelema. Today's Amud is also being learned Ilui Nishmat, Shlomo ben Yaakov, and Avraham ben Ezra. The Neshamot should have an aliyah. This month's learning of the community has been graciously dedicated by the Shea and Mahbubi families. It should be an ultimate zchut for all their mishpachot. Amen. Says the Gemara, Amar Rabba Bar Rav Huna, Hashta Damri Rabban Gamliel, Etrog Achar Lekitato. We had a machloket Tanaim. This is one of the last items that we discussed between Rabban Gamliel and Rabbi Eliezer as far as the comparison of etrog with other trees and vegetables. Rabban Gamliel was the one that held etrog is very uniquely positioned, that for masrot, for masrot, it is like vegetable that you go after when you pick the etrog off the tree, whereas by other halachot of shvi'it and other things, it is like a regular tree that you go after chanata. Only by masrot, you follow the time that you pick it off the ground. When it comes to orla, when it comes to netaravai, when it comes to shvi'it, it follows the regular guidelines of all the other trees that you go after when the fruit started growing. But when it comes to masrot, you follow when it was picked off the tree. And Rabbi Eliezer said, no, even for masrot, we follow the time that it started growing like any other fruit. So there's no difference, according to Rabbi Eliezer, between a etrog tree and any other tree for that matter. Now that Rabban Gamliel holds that etrog is uniquely positioned like this, that for masrot you follow the time of harvest, so to speak, when you take the fruits off the tree, says the Gemara, Hashta de Amar Rabban Gamliel. Now that we know the Shita of Rabban Gamliel, who holds etrog achar lekitato isuro, that we follow by masrot after the time of lekita, keyerek, like yerek. Now the question that begs is a very obvious question. When was Rosh Hashanah for Yerakot? When was Rosh Hashanah for Yerakot? Be'echad be'tishrei. When is Rosh Hashanah for trees? Tu B'Shvat, right? Let's follow the Bet Hillel straight up, right? Tu B'Shvat. So when is Rosh Hashanah for etrog? You're telling me that for practical purposes of Ma'asir, we follow halachot of Yerek. For Orla, Netarevai, and Shvi'it, we follow the halachot of trees. So if it's followed by Yerek, the Rosh Hashanah should be really Echad B'Tishrei. If it's followed like regular trees, the Rosh Hashanah should be Tu B'Shvat. Which one is it? Right? We never thought about that. That's a very fine question. Because if you tell me Rabban Gamliel holds that this is like a hybrid, it's not really a tree, but it's not also a yerek. So which one is it when it comes legabe Rosh Hashanah? Says the Gemara, the memra that we have in the name of Rabba Bar Rav Huna reads that now that we have Rabban Gamliel who holds this is like yerek in regards to its maserot, it also follows the halachot of Yerek for Rosh Hashanah of it. Achar lekitato isuro keyerek. Therefore, Rosh Hashanah shelo Tishrei. Rosh Hashanah is going to be Tishrei. This is what the Gemara quotes in the name of Rabba Bar Rav Huna. Now, as much as you could have a checkmate question, the next question is going to be a checkmate question, because the Gemara is going to bring a member from Rabban Gamliel who says the Rosh Hashanah of etrog is on Tu B'Shvat. And that's a checkmate, right? Meaning, we're not going to have it as direct as that, but we're going to have a memra that says by etrog that was picked off the tree before Tu B'Shvat, and after Tu B'Shvat you can't give maser from one on the other. Which means, by definition, whoever said that holds like Rabban Gamliel, that by maserot we go after the time that you pick it. There's only one person that holds that, and that's Rabban Gamliel. So for all practical purposes, this is Rabban Gamliel, and yet it says Tu B'Shvat, before Tu B'Shvat, after Tu B'Shvat, which tells you that the cutoff Rosh Hashanah for etrog, tree of etrog, is not the Rosh Hashanah v'chad b'tishrei, but it is Tu B'Shvat, right? So that's a checkmate. Let's read it inside. It says the Gemara Metivem, they asked the Beit Midrash, Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar Omer. Rabbi Shlomo Yisraeli said, Liket etrog erev Tu B'Shvat. If you picked a few etrogs on erev Tu B'Shvat, Ad shelo tava hashemesh, before nightfall, v'chazar v'liket mishetavo hashemesh, and you took some more after the nightfall. Now it's Tu B'Shvat. Says Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, in that case, en tormin umasrin mizal. Even though that you took them an hour apart from each other, you cannot separate terumot umaserot of one bunch. You need to keep them separately for terumot umaserot. En tormin umasrin mizal. Ze lefi shen tormin umasrin lo min hachadash al hayashan lo min hayashan al hachadash. This is already 2 different years. Before Tu B'Shvat, after Tu B'Shvat, it's 2 different years. Now, says the Gemara, Hayta Shlishit Nichneset L'Revi'it, just to finish a Davar Shalem, says if it was the 3rd year going into the 4th, this is the Gabe Maserot, obviously the 3rd year is Maser Ani, and the 4th is Maser Sheni. So if it's a 3rd year, Nichneset L'Revi'it, Sherishit Maser Rishon Maser Ani, it will have Maser Rishon and Maser Ani, and Revit will be Maser Rishon and Maser Sheni. Fine. This is the memra of Rabbi Shlomo Yisraeli. Now, says the Gemara, Man Shamatle, who do you know in the Tanaim that holds the Azil Batar Lekita, that goes for Etrog, the Masrot of Etrog goes after when you pick it off the tree? There's only one person that holds that. And that's Rabban Gamliel. According to everybody else, for Maserot, you go after the Shat Chanata like any other tree in the world, right? So this that we just learned is Rabban Gamliel. And yet, when is the Rosh Hashanah? Tu B'Shvat, right? Tu B'Shvat. So you wanted to question that because Etrog is like Yerek when it comes to Maserot, is like vegetables, that you suggested that the Rosh Hashanah should also be Echad B'Tishrei, that's checkmate out of existence, because you see that the only person that holds that you go after Maserot for regular vegetables, who is Rabbi Gamliel, he still says that the Rosh Hashanah stays Echad, not Echad B'Tishrei, but Tu B'Shvat. So says the Gemara, Man shamad le de'azil batar lekita. Who follows the lekita for masrot of etrog? Rabban Gamliel. It's Rabban Gamliel. Ve'katani, and it says it's Tu B'Shvat. It's not echad b'tishrei. Ela itmar hachit. So therefore, it's not sayable. This that we said before was checkmate. You remember that we started today. Rabbi Shimon Elazar Omer. That was the kasha. We started that. Rabbi Bar Avuna, he said that because Rabbi Bar Avuna's memory was that because by etrog you go after Shat Lekita, the Rosh Hashanah is also Echad B'Tishrei. That's what he wanted to suggest. Now this is not sayable anymore. Rabbi Bar Avuna cannot suggest that according to Rabban Gamliel, the Rosh Hashanah of etrog is Echad B'Tishrei, because we just checkmated that. So how was this said? Says the Gemara, you miscoded the memra of Rabbi Bar Avuna. The real way that Rabbi Bar Avuna said it is like this. Itmar, if he was said, Hachi Itmar, this is the correct way that it was said in the Bet Midrash. Amar Rabbi Bar Avuna, Rabbi Huna said, Afal gav de Amar Rabban Gamliel etrog achar lekita ki yerek. Even though that Rabban Gamliel holds that by maserot of etrog you go like yerek, like vegetables, after the time that you pick it off the tree, still the Rosh Hashanah stays like any other tree. The Rosh Hashanah is Tu B'Shvat, not Echad B'Tishrei, which is Rosh Hashanah leYerakot. Rosh Hashanah Shalom, Shvat. The Rosh Hashanah stays Shvat. The way the Gemara says it's Shvat is because obviously the Gemara is keeping it safe between Bet Shammai and Bet Hillel, but nevertheless it is Tu B'Shvat according to Bet Hillel. So says the Gemara, a side point. This is very technical. Ma'ashna Hatam, when we were learning about Yerakot, the example that the Gemara gave was the Katani, the language of the Mishnah is Im hayta shniya nichneset l'sherishit. If it's the second year going into the third year, how you deal with it. That was the example of the Gemara. When it comes to etrog, here, the example of the Gemara, the Mishnah was Umashna hacha, the Katani im hayta shlishit nichneset l'revi'it, right? Which is what we just did right now. Remember the third line up from the bottom of the Amud, when we're talking about etrog, the example that was given is Hayta shlishit nichneset l'revi'it. So the Gemara is asking like a very fine-tuned question. She goes, wait a second, I'm wondering, are you just throwing different numbers of years, or is it there's a cheshbon? Why one time you say second year going to the third, and now you're saying third year going to the fourth, right? Just choose the same example for all the examples that you give. And the Gemara says, actually, it has a cheshbon. What's the cheshbon? Listen to this. Milta agav orcha kamashmalan is coming to teach you an agricultural fact that you would never know otherwise. Agav orcha. Agav orcha, even from, like the Gemara says, aleu lo yibol, even from sichat chulin of talmidei chachamim, you learn halachot, right? This is like almost like a sichat chulin. The Mishnah gives an example of which year going into which year, and says the Gemara, even that is said very precisely. You know why third going to the fourth, not second going to the third? Milta agav urcha kamashmalan. It's a side fact of agricultural system. The etrog kashle yada. The tree of etrog is a very sensitive plant. If you mess with it, if you touch it too much, it's not going to produce fruits. So what happens on Shvit, when you have a year that everything is hefker, so your field is open, right, to all of the passerbyers. Everybody is coming into a thing and everyone's touching everything. For a whole year is like that. So what happens? The etrog tree would not produce anything until 3 years after. Right? It's the sensitivity of an etrog tree that if you mess with it so much and you touch it too much, it's not going to be bearing fruit for the next few years. It says the Gemara, because a whole year people are messing with it and touching it and looking at the fruits, and it's not good enough. The other one is good enough, but a lot of people are around it. It's not going to produce no ta'in peri atilat shanin until 3 years. It's not going to be producing serious fruits. So says the Gemara, Ba'amine Rabbi Yochanan mi Rabbi Yanai. Now Rabbi Yochanan is asking a question, from Rabbi Yanai. Etrog Rosh Hashanah shelo ematai. When is the Rosh Hashanah of Etrog? And he says, well, Shvat, right? We just mentioned the halacha would be that even though that the maserot is like vegetables, the Rosh Hashanah stays Tu B'Shvat like any other tree, right? So says Rabbi Yochanan, okay, that's good enough, but which Shvat is it? Is it Shvat of the lunar year or Shvat of the solar year? Let me explain this, right? Amar le Shvat. So Shvat de Chodashim, asks Rabbi Yochanan, or Shvat de Tkufa? Is it the Shvat based on the lunar months, or is it Shvat of Tkufa? Tkufa means seasons, right? And seasons are always governed by the solar calendar. So the easiest way of saying it is a Shvat of lunar months, or is it the Shvat of the solar calendar. Now you'll ask, what does that mean exactly, right? The calendar goes obviously after months. Months is a moon, right? So says the Gemara, Amale de Chodashim. It is going after the months, which means what we call Shvat always will be the Rosh Hashanah for Ilanot. Now let's explain what this means. When we say Rosh Hashanah le'ilanot, means something is actually happening, right? In the tree, in the world of the renewal of the trees, this is when it renews itself, right? That's what it means, Rosh Hashanah le'ilanot, like Chaka ilanot. Now, why do we make some of the years Shana Me'uberet? Well, because we know that the lunar calendar is short 11 days from the solar calendar. And therefore, if you strictly follow the lunar calendar, then after 3 years, you're 33 days off from the solar calendar. You're a whole full month plus off, and that means you are off by being ahead, right? You're going to be celebrating Nisan when it's still freezing cold, right? Dreaming of a white Pesach, right? That would not work, right? Because the Torah says, "Bemoed Chag Ha'aviv." You have to celebrate Moed Nisan in Chag Ha'aviv, which means it has to already be hitting, before you celebrate Pesach, it has to already be hitting the season of spring. That's Chag Ha'aviv. So therefore, we have to adjust the calendar of bridging that difference between solar and lunar calendar. We follow the lunar calendar, we adjust it to compensate those missed days, to gain it back in order to make sure Nisan is always, Chag Pesach, I should say, is always after Tkufat Nisan, which is the beginning of spring season, right? But all of that said, we recognize that spring, which is the start of the renewal process, starts from a solar source, right? So therefore, when you're talking about Tu B'Shvat, which is before, obviously it's before Nisan, but it's the time that the steppe is going through the trees and they have gotten enough rain and all that, that follows which calendar? Solar calendar. Right? So now you understand the legitimacy of the question Rabbi Yochanan is asking, because imagine to yourself a year that is Shana Me'uberet, right? When you have Shana Me'uberet, a regular year, when you have Tu B'Shvat, how much before Pesach is that? 2 months, right? So the trees are getting ready, or it's already the beginning of the life, the new life of this year for trees. If you have a Shana Me'uberet, that means the lunar calendar has been already enough behind, that's over a month. So when you have Tu B'Shvat, how many months are you before Pesach? 3 months. That's way before the spring. Is that still Rosh Hashanah le'ilanot? Shouldn't that be following the solar calendar, that adjustment that we do for seasons? Should it not be done for this as well? That's the question of Rabbi Yochanan. You see how legit, it's a serious question, it's a good question. And yet the Mishnah says, Tu B'Shvat is Rosh Hashanah le'ilanot. We never say, oh well, sometimes it's going to be Tu B'Adar, Aleph, right? Is that the reality? Is it sometimes, is it the month before Adar, which is before Nisan? Or is it always the month after Tevet? That's the question, right? Because Shvat is always after Tevet, but the month that really things happen for the trees is the month that's before the Adar, that's before Nisan. Let's call it 2 months before Nisan, right? So that's the question of Rabbi Yochanan. It's a fair question, as fair as it could get. Says the Gemara. Rabbi Yochanan asked Rabbi Yanai, now let's go through this. He's going to actually spell out what we said. Etrog Rosh Hashanah shelo ematay. Well, when is the Rosh Hashanah for Etrog Taka? Amar Shvat. So the Gemara says, well, okay, fine, Shvat, but Shvat the Chodashim or Shvat the Tkufa. Which one? Is it lunar or is it solar season based? Amaleh, Rabbi Yanai answered him. He said, no, Shvat de Chodashim. It goes after the actual months. So what we actually call Shvat is always going to be the Rosh Hashanah, not Adar. So says the Gemara, Ba'amineh Rava mirav Nachman, ve'amri la Rabbi Yochanan mi Rabbi Yanai. Right? Say it this way now more clearly. Hayta shana me'uberet. If you have a leap year, now you have 2 Adars. Then Mahu. Then what do you say? What do you say then? Amale halachic rov shanim. So we know what he's asking. He's asking like, well, really, this is too early to be Shvat. And the answer to him is, still, even though that it is too early, we go after the majority of the years. That Tu B'Shvat is the Rosh Hashanah, and we keep it the same way. So even in a leap year, that Tu B'Shvat is kind of early, still Rosh Hashanah, Legabe Masrot, and all that is going to be Tu B'Shvat. Amar Rabba. Now Rabba says, this is going to be a little bit of a technical Gemara, and we need to keep our minds a little bit to it, but the preface to it is very simple. The preface to it is, there are 2 parallel things that happen on the 7th year, on Shnat HaShemitah. One is that the things of the Shemitah year don't belong to me, right? Hashem basically gave what belongs to every individual to the whole community, right? In that 1 year, you don't plow, you don't plant, your land becomes equivalent of Hefker. Amazing. And if it's Hefker, do I have to give Maser on Hefker? Not mine. It's Hefker. Right? So you could have a reality that I am not separating Terumot to Maserot simply because it is not mine. But yet, the fruits that are produced in this year, they have the Kedusha of Shvit, and therefore they are subjugated to the laws of Bi'ur, the laws of burning and getting rid of those fruits. What is that? Simply put is like this. If I have a field with whatever it is that's growing there, so I'm the owner, just like other people could take, I could take also, right? So I could get my pantry, right, put all the junk out and empty it and fill up my pantry with whatever it is on my land. I could do that too. If you could do it, why can't I do it, right? So I filled up my pantry to this pouring out, right? There's one problem. Problem is, I cannot own that in that way after it's no longer available out there. I could keep my pantry packed for as long as the fruits are also in the field. The moment that the season is finished and there's no fruits to be found on the field, I have to get rid of that as well, right? So you could have ownership of taking it home, but you can't store it, right? So if it's a fancy way for me to eat it off my field, I could do. A fancy way of eating it off my field is I pack my pantry and I eat it. But the moment that there's no longer anything on the field to be found, then my pantry now is in storage. I can't store it. And that's the chiyuv of biur, right? This, by the way, is parenthetically the reason that you hear Rabbanim tell you that products that come out of Eretz Yisrael after Shnat HaShemitah, you have to be very careful. Specifically wine, because wine is mass-produced, right? And a wine that was produced on Shnat HaShemitah from Eretz Yisrael fruits, right? So as Kedushat Shvit, and Kedushat Shvit you can't store. So therefore, comes Shat HaBiur, that wine now is no longer mutter to use, right? And sometimes this is again not everything is under control, because you're talking about a worldwide business, which is not done by frum people necessarily. The production is by frum people, right? The production is with hashkacha and all of that. But once it's bottled and capped, it doesn't become yain nesach. The bottle could end up anywhere, anytime, right? and all of a sudden you see it surfaces on high, price reductions because the ones who know it don't buy it, right? So therefore you have this like massive sales on this wines, and people who are simple don't know, like, wow, that's amazing company wine from Eretz Yisrael, and it's like half the price. Awesome, right? So you have to be mindful of checking which year the production was, and if it's a Shnat Shemitah, so then perhaps it is after Shat Biur, because that's the same year after the Pesach, and that's basically done, and that wine cannot be can no longer be used. So the Gemara here, again, we gave a preface that's important, but the Gemara that we're going to be starting basically is going to be comparing these two together. When you have an etrog, again, this is very much me'inyan le'inyan ba'oto inyan. We've been talking about the growth versus harvest of etrog on different years. Do you follow the harvest? Do you follow the growth? And the Gemara now is going to say, well, so what happens when the etrog grows on Shishit and is harvested on Shvi'it, right? Do we give it the halachot of Shvi'it that is patur from Maaser, but it's chayav bebiur, right? Because it's the kedushat Shvi'it, you have to get rid of it, right? After it's no longer available. Or do we deal with it like the 60-year produce that should be chayav Maaser and there's no biur? And we are going to see some very surprising things that are mentioned, and we would have to bang out all the details to iron out what the shitot are in regards to that, which is a actually very gishmak and juicy piece of Gemara, which we're going to learn together in the next shiur.